Hello, everyone. And it's the RCD ShareNet, and I'm Dave Thompson, the Community Outreach Coordinator at the Richmond Center for Disability here. And this is our salute to Invisible Illness Awareness. May is usually the month that it is celebrated, May 12th. And we are continuing all month with information about invisible illnesses and disabilities for everyone, our members, and everyone out there. We usually do a physical presentation and event, and we've been doing that for, this would have been our 12th year now. So, but we've had to pivot as everyone has, and here is where we are on Zoom. I'm coming to you from my living room. And we have a great guest today, and our topic today is empowering others through our experience, and this is a perfect person for that. Welcome, Eileen Davidson, and I'm just going to quickly read your bio and then we'll get going. So Eileen is a rheumatoid arthritis patient advocate from Vancouver, and she volunteers with the Arthritis Research Canada Patient Advisory Board and the Canadian Institute of Health Research, Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis Patient Engagement Research Ambassador, among others. And when you're not doing that, you have a blog and you're a writer, and your blog is called Creaky Joint. Is that blog? Is I'm using the right term now?
Creaky Joints is an arthritis publication, and my blog is chroniceileen.com.
And you're Chronic Eileen. Yeah, there used to be a Chronic Babe too, years ago.
I know her.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you are also a mom, and you have a son. Yes. So welcome, Eileen, to the ShareNet.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's very exciting. So whenever we do our invisible illness events, we try our best to reduce isolation and information. That's our big thing, is because I follow kind of what I went through in my journey. Is I was in 6 months, I was basically a 35-year-old man, and I went to be a 75-year-old man. And so many changes. And so it's just, I get people that come in the door and talk to me, and sometimes they take a handful of pamphlets and they've spent an hour, and they're just like, their heads are like swelled because of the information, but that's what they've been needing, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times our participants in the community, they really respond to stuff that they can use right away, physically, that they can put immediately. We all know that over time we get lots of medical advice, and medical advice is very vital, but it does have its limitations, especially years go by in an illness. A lot of times you want to see those experiences of other people. They're struggling. A lot of people I talk to, they're struggling with what the future is going to look like for them, and they're searching for more. And to have people that have sort of been there, done that, got the t-shirt sort of idea is vital. So my first question to you, and I asked this question because I actually did this at a talk that I did once, and I found it worked really well, is what were some of your biggest successes and also some of your failures to get you to this point?
Well, I think anybody living with a chronic illness knows that it takes a lot of trial and error to find what works for you. So I guess there was many missteps in different medications, learning how to self-cope and self-manage living with a chronic illness, reaching eventually that acceptance points, because the grieving process is quite an extensive one. You're bouncing back and forth between different emotions, and then just adjusting to new life, finding the things that you used to do are something that you can't do, particularly like with rheumatoid arthritis. I used to love to dance. Now dance is really painful. I can't do that. And saying goodbye to my career. But through my chronic illness, I've been able to find a lot of other things I enjoy doing. Like I started writing, and that's how I started writing for Creaky Joints and Healthline and my blog, and also started to participate in research and fundraising for different organizations like the Arthritis Society, Arthritis Research Canada, even Pain BC I've volunteered with. And those have all been very, very rewarding. And if we're going to be on the topic of isolation, I asked myself, well, how isolated and how lonely and how bored would I be if I didn't participate in this research or share my story so much?
Hmm.
So it's really, even though chronic illness is a very isolating thing to experience, I've been able to find my community through it.
Very well said. I always say the same thing. It's like I learn this stuff, and if I don't tell anybody, what's the use of it?
Mhm.
Right? Because I can only use it so much, and right. So that's my sort of goal is I'm not keeping this stuff hidden. If you want to know about it, I'll tell you about it. Right? That's
Yeah.
for sure. So what, especially with COVID, maybe there's been some changes, but what are you sort of doing actively now when it comes to your illness, to advocating, all that sort of stuff?
Well, right before COVID, I was actually at a conference in Victoria, BC, the Canadian Rheumatology Association conference. So I was actively going to conferences. I went to one in Georgia. I've gone to ones in Chicago and Dallas, and I occasionally would do speaking opportunities, or I would participate in person during meetings with advocacy boards. I would do fundraising events, but all of that's been put on hold, and I've had to kind of now do that through Zoom. My writing definitely skyrocketed quite a bit during the year. I've had a lot more to write about, especially with how the coronavirus actually would affect somebody like me being immunocompromised. So I've been really focusing on kind of creating awareness around being high risk for COVID-19 despite my age. I'm only 35 now, but when I was diagnosed with RA, I was 29. That's, to most people, they think I'm too young for arthritis, but that's not the case. And a lot of people don't really understand that my disease is an autoimmune disease, so it makes me at high risk for COVID. So I've been really focused on kind of creating awareness about how to stay safe from the pandemic locally and how others can keep people like us safe, because we have to be all in all this together.
And a lot of people, they were phoning me going, oh, so you should be getting your letter and stuff like that. But with fibromyalgia, it is considered an arthritic in that area. But what my doctor told me was that it's because of the medications you're taking more about that it compromises you as opposed to the actual illness.
Yes,
So
so fibromyalgia isn't considered an autoimmune disease. However, depending on what medications you are on may make you more high risk.
That's what's
or other comorbidities that somebody may live with.
Right.
So especially if they have diabetes or high blood pressure, that will be something.
But I found when we first got locked down, I kept on saying, look, I've been planning for this my whole life. I was a prison guard, and then for the first 5 years, I didn't leave my house. I got this isolation stuff down.
Yeah.
Give me a call.
Having dealt with long periods of illness, missing out on concerts, parties, most of my friends kind of stopped asking me to hang out when I stopped being able to come out all the time, or we don't have the same things in common anymore. Like before arthritis, I was at every heavy metal show in town up late at night. I was the mosh pit when I was young and fit.
Well, I always had a list that I had to go through if someone invited me to something, and after a couple times they just stopped phoning. Is it smoky? Is it loud? Is it, it was just that was it, right?
Yeah, so I've been used to just kind of hanging out at home and trying to figure out how to make the most of being by myself or being with limited amount of people. And I already knew how to avoid people because I, even before the pandemic, knew that an infection isn't something very good for me, having dealt with pneumonia, from just catching a normal everyday cold. So I was really good at already the social distancing, the lockdown period. And I had been dreaming of some of my appointments being done over the phone or over the computer instead of me having to cart myself for an hour or so to an appointment that would take all of 10 minutes.
Yes, especially when you're constantly going to a doctor like we are. It's nice to have that. I had the same experience a couple of years ago. I got in a car accident, and I've tried my best because that's one of the most main ways people get fibromyalgia is from the results of a car accident. I spent 19 years avoiding it, and we got into a fender bender, and it's the same thing. I was like, I was 19 years. And it
Yeah.
took me a couple months because to me, like it was a really, really minor, but that doesn't matter to us. Minor to us is major, right? So
Yeah, I was in a minor car accident with RA, and that really triggered some of the most severe pain I've experienced
yeah, and I'm
after
just
the
like
fact.
having nightmares going, oh, it's going to set me back years. Luckily, it did say maybe I'm still repairing the shoulder, but
Yep.
it's just exponential. I always tell people, imagine getting a dead body, tying it to yourself, and then walking around all day.
Mm.
That's what it's kind of like. So my second question is, or third question is, a lot of times it's probably the same. I always am bad when the barometer changes, like the transition days, hot to cold, cold to hot. Doesn't
Mhm.
always have to be rainy. Everyone thinks it's always rainy, but it's usually the days before that or after that are bad. And mornings are my worst, by far,
Mhm.
worst. What are some of the stuff what are the first things that go through your head in the morning when you've got all these pain signals going on and your back's hurting or what else? What sort of stops you from rolling over, putting the covers over your head and staying in bed kind of idea? I get that question asked a lot because that is usually when you have a big boulder on yourself and you're just like, why am I doing this again? Right?
Mhm. Well, I guess the number one thing that gets me out of bed in the morning is my bladder. And then my need for coffee.
Yeah.
My love for coffee.
Yeah.
And also my cat's needing food. But to get up and actually get moving, the weather is a huge one for sure, especially with the RA. And those, rainy days can sometimes be okay for me, but when the weather, like today particular, is not a very nice day, it's kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
And I feel it. But with RA being kind of a disease that creates a lot of morning stiffness, so my I can't sleep in some days because being too still with RA creates a lot of that stiff feeling in our
Yeah.
body, so we have to get up and get moving.
That's the evil part of the illness. It's like they make you so tired, but then you can't stay still for very long or you're going to be in more pain.
Yeah, and I go to bed like at 8-9 o'clock at night some nights, like a grandma. It's okay, it happens. I'm up really early in the morning, so I, as a writer, those are actually my best hours. So I do
Yeah.
all of my favorite work early in the morning. I get up and I crack my joints. I do some movements. My physiotherapist or watching yoga videos, and then only doing the ones that I'm comfortable doing, because everybody's joint pain and joint mobility is different. So just doing the movements that make me feel comfortable, and of course coffee. I should say water. I know I should say water, but everybody's just gonna go straight to the coffee first anyways.
With me, what I found was that that you're going to feel better. You get to that point. I know by 10 o'clock or when else, but it's the effort it takes you to get to that point. And how are you
Yeah.
going to be at 10 o'clock? Because how much work did it take you to get through all the stuff that you're throwing in the morning? And sometimes I'd have to just go, okay, it's a write-off day. There was way too much effort in the morning.
Yeah, there are some days where you can just tell it's going to be a write-off, but then there's
Yeah.
also some days where I find like some days I can't really actually get going until 3 p.m. So it just depends on listening to your body, saying, well, what kind of day is today? But of course, we don't always have days where we can we can't put things on hold sometimes, but I find sometimes just adrenaline gets me moving. So if I've got something really important to do or stressful or major to do, sometimes that fuels me, or maybe it's the anxiety.
Yeah. I find I've even started giving myself little tasks to do in the morning because at least it's something. I call them small victories, but because my brain is usually mush and the pain is so bad, I'll just stand still and lean against a wall. But if I go, hey, I got to put all my pills together, or I have to do this, it's just enough to get that past that, right? And at least it's something done. And it's just kind of like one step, and then you get that ball rolling, right? But there's also got to be something said for get to that stage where you know that you have write-off days. There's no problem with them. You take them as you could. You roll over, you check out Netflix, and you binge something, and you start again the next day, right?
Yeah, and over time, like I've learned to kind of know if one day I've done too much, and the next day I can tell if it's gonna be a write-off day, or I've gone through so many write-off days and been able to figure out why I've had those write-off days. So I've come to the point now where I can schedule ahead. Well, say I have my medications. I know for a day or two after, I'm not going to be able to do much because I get monthly infusions, right? They leave me in an infusion coma, kind of like when I got the COVID vaccine. That left me literally, I think, partially brain dead for a few days. I couldn't think at all. I made so many mistakes. I don't even think I knew my name, and I slept a lot. But that's okay. It's just, I'm so used to it. It passes. But there's days where it's like, if I go for a hike, I know the next day is going to be a complete write-off. Or if I've done a major clean day, like because I've just moved, I know that this weekend is going to be a write-off for me.
And that's the thing. One thing I talk about sometimes is knowing your functional range, and that takes time. You're going to have to get yourself knocked on your behind a couple times to know that, and going, okay, that was too much. We got to back that off tomorrow or the next day. But once you get that, then you can live in there. And the greatest thing is that you can voluntarily step out of it if you really want to. And that's the big thing, I think, that helps people move forward, because it's like, I know this is going to be a write-off day tomorrow, but I'm going to be at my son's, concert, or I'm going to be there, and I know the steps that I have to take tomorrow in a couple days. I'll cancel a couple meetings, blah, blah, blah. And that's when people start getting that control back in their life, I think. Yeah. But it takes, and that was the one thing that amazes me most about you when I met you first, was most people, that takes so much longer. And to be able to get to that research stage and so quickly, and I commend you, because I did that route. I started, looking into that sort of research stuff, but I think I needed stuff that, because of my age, I needed stuff that I needed to hold on to it right away. So I was more of the practical stuff, and I can totally see your point, being at the age you were and having a son. You've got time that maybe you can affect some sort of change that will help you in the long term, right? But there was, it took me 5 years to get diagnosed, and there was so much questions, and it was just like, oh, research, it'll be way out, it's not going to make any huge effect. I'll try another angle, right? But that's what, 6 years is not a lot of time. It's just like, I always double everything, right? And I was just, my first 5 years were just a mess, a blur. I slept 1 or 2 hours a night, and it was just basically living. So that's what I was always impressed about being able to do what you've done in 6 years.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have got a bunch of stuff going on. We've had our May 12th show, and I sort of educated everybody, and that is why I've got all this blue and purple in your screen. I've got the blue is the color for chronic fatigue syndrome. It's called ME, but I don't try pronouncing that all the time. It's very hard.
I can't even pronounce it. It's okay.
Yeah, myofascial encephal something or other. And then I've got my purple orchid back here for fibromyalgia, lupus, and whatnot else. And we talked about doing events, colors. There's the light up the night, and hopefully we've seen some. Last year the BC Place was lit up in purple on May 12th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
here's a little something for you. Blue is also the color for arthritis. Blue and purple is the color for rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. And May in the US is National Arthritis Awareness Month.
Yeah. You see, like in the US, they don't celebrate chronic illness awareness until September. So it's a little different.
We don't celebrate arthritis awareness until September.
Yeah.
Which is a real hassle for last year, because we had so much smoke. Right. Nobody could really get a lot of their physical activity things for the fundraising done. So yeah.
And that was the other thing I just wanted to say, that kind of popped into my head. You talked about adrenaline, and I've kind of experienced this. You've done quite a weight loss and change too, right? and you've sort of experiencing exercise now, because I'm kind of finding exercise is my new drug.
Yeah.
It hurts like heck, but it's kind of that thing I'm turning to now, especially with the fact I can't go to a sauna, a swimming pool, all these other things. And that wasn't the case before, but now that I've gotten into that, it's my new sort of go-to.
Well, that's maybe why I got so fast to where I am. So, in that 6 years, because I don't remember where exactly I heard it first, but when I was diagnosed with arthritis, I did a lot of reading. And then I also did a lot of writing myself. So as I wrote, I was teaching myself how to live with arthritis, and it was a very cathartic experience to get all my emotions and to write down all these routines and self-care tips that I was teaching myself, but also teaching anybody else who read my blog or articles that have been published. But I think really quite soon after my diagnosis is when I started to try to exercise. And then I started to participate in research being done by Arthritis Research Canada, which was starting to focus a lot on exercise with RA or different types of arthritis, and being involved in those studies, particularly the one with using a Fitbit and an app that they developed for tracking RA symptoms, was so beneficial for me, kind of learning about my disease, learning about those sweet spots, when I've done too much, how much is too much, and then also being able to see monthly charts of my symptoms. So seeing like the week before my infusion, I slow down, and then a few days after my infusion, I slow down. Sometimes I have a pain spike because the way my meds work, or sometimes I have a lower. I could see things like how my menstrual cycle affected my RA, my mood affected my RA, my sleep affected my RA. And I think a lot of that, participating in research, not only was a learning experience for me, but it's teaching other future healthcare providers and people with arthritis how to live with this disease and how it impacts us. So I think that's partially why I got so fast to where I am today.
And you have that validity too. I always struggled with worrying. It really messed with my head because I had a young son when I first got diagnosed, and sometimes I felt guilty smiling when I was out with him, at a park or something like that. I had to ask strange women to put him in the swings, and that really messed with my head. So I took a lot of time to get that sort of stuff baggage out and be sort of confident with and then I got to the point where it's like, I'm wearing whatever I'm wearing, and if it's purple and it's corduroy and it's from the 70s and it's comfortable, I'm sorry, but I'm wearing it.
Yeah.
And I got that.
Clothing's
that
very
took time.
uncomfortable.
It took time, right?
Yeah, it's going through that acceptance process, and I think that it never really stops, because living with a chronic illness, especially a progressive one, and as we age, we have to continuously mourn different things that the younger self or healthier self could once do. So we honestly just develop a darker sense of humor and very great coping skills.
Yeah, and that didn't help that I was from the military, a nightclub bouncer, and a prison guard. The dark sense of humor was already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this just sort of honed it.
That would do it. That would definitely do it.
That's going to be it for part 1. We have part 2 coming up in on the 19th, and I just want to remind everybody that we have in the box, in the description box on YouTube, is a whole bunch of information and links to a lot of Eileen's contacts, Instagram, Snapchat, all those other things, and also links that I have put on and that we have for RCD. And next time, in the next part, we're going to be talking, I've named it basically the silver lining, or the flip side. So a little bit about some of the things that you can kind of say are the positive, and sometimes people have a hard time talking about that, because it's like, no, this isn't a positive, it's a 20-year hell, blah blah blah. So but there is a point where you kind of go, you know what, this wouldn't have happened if this wasn't, and that whole domino effect. So thanks very much for joining us, and we will be back in 2 days with part 2 of this great interview. Thanks, everybody.